My sister Chloe and my mother Eleanor left me stranded and bleeding on the side of a highway after a car accident because they decided it was more important to save Chloe's new designer luggage from the rain. So 15 years later, when they came crawling back for my money, I used it to take her children and send her to prison. It sounds like something out of a cheap novel, I know, the kind of melodrama you roll your eyes at, but it was my life. Every single, unbelievable moment of it. The cruelty wasn't a sudden storm, it was the climate I grew up in. A steady, oppressive humidity of malice that I just learned to breathe. They didn't just say no to me when they needed something, their entire existence was a rejection of mine, and when I finally said no back, they tried to burn my entire world to the ground. They just weren't prepared for the fact that I had learned to build my world out of fireproof material. It began, as these things always do, in the quiet, carpeted rooms of a seemingly normal suburban house. I was the afterthought, the second child, the one who wasn't quite what they'd ordered. Chloe was the first, the golden one, a sunbeam made manifest in my mother's eyes. She was born with blonde hair that curled perfectly without any effort and a smile that could charm money out of a statue. I was born with straight, mud-brown hair and a perpetually serious expression, as if I'd entered the world already contemplating an escape route. From the moment I could understand words, the comparison was the air I breathed. Chloe's drawing of a lopsided house was taped to the fridge at eye level, a masterpiece of toddler art. My meticulously shaded drawing of our family dog was used as a coaster for my father's beer before being tossed in the bin. Chloe got a brand new 10-speed bike for her 10th birthday. I got the dented, rusty hand-me-down that was already too small for me, and when I pointed out that the chain kept slipping, my father, Richard, just sighed and said, "Well, maybe if you were more careful, it wouldn't do that." Careful. I was the most careful child in the world. I had to be. One wrong step, one spilled glass of milk, one grade that was less than an A, and the atmosphere in the house would drop 20 degrees. But it was a different kind of cold for me than it was for Chloe. When Chloe spilled milk, my mother, Eleanor, would rush over cooing, "Oh, my sweet girl, accidents happen, let mommy clean that up for you." When I spilled milk, it was a dramatic sigh, a roll of the eyes, and a sharp, "Why can't you be more like your sister? Can't you do anything right?" It was a question I asked myself 1,000 times a day. The dynamic was a carefully choreographed ballet of cruelty with my mother as the lead dancer and my father as the silent partner who made sure she never stumbled. Chloe was the star, and I was the stagehand who was supposed to be invisible but was constantly being tripped over and cursed at. Every achievement of mine was minimized, every failure magnified. I won the state spelling bee in 7th grade. The school sent a letter home, there was a small article in the local paper. When I showed it to my mother, she glanced at it for a second before saying, "That's nice, dear. Did you see the dress Chloe picked out for the spring formal? She's going to be the most beautiful girl there." My victory was a footnote to her daughter's social life. But when I came in second in the district science fair, my father sat me down for a long, soul-crushing talk about the importance of trying your best, about how coming in second was just being the first loser. Chloe had spent her science fair budget on a new pair of shoes and turned in a poster with pictures cut out of a magazine, and she'd received praise for her creative interpretation of the project. It was insane. It was like living in a funhouse mirror where all my reflections were distorted and grotesque and all of Chloe's were angelic. They sabotaged my happiness, actively. When I was 16, I had my first real boyfriend, a sweet, nerdy boy named Mark who loved sci-fi movies and held my hand like it was a precious, fragile bird. He was the first person outside of a book who made me feel seen. For 2 months, I was almost happy. Then my mother invited him over for dinner. The whole meal was a masterclass in psychological warfare. She'd ask him questions about his family, his future, all with a saccharine smile, and then she'd turn to me and say things like, "Oh, Lily is just so sensitive, you have to be so careful with her, she cries at the drop of a hat." Or, "She's a smart girl, of course, but not very practical. Her head is always in the clouds." She painted a picture of me as a fragile, unstable, high-maintenance burden. Chloe chimed in with stories, all of them exaggerated or outright fabricated, about how I'd thrown tantrums as a child or how I was awkward around people. I watched Mark's face go from open and friendly to cautious and confused. After dinner, Chloe cornered him in the hallway. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw her touch his arm, her expression a perfect blend of sympathy and seduction. The next day, Mark broke up with me. He said I was too much for him. I cried for a week, and when my mother saw my red-rimmed eyes, she just said, "Well, what did you expect? You have to be realistic about these things, Lily. A boy like that was never going to be serious about a girl like you." It wasn't a warning, it was a curse, a prophecy she was doing her best to fulfill. The money, of course, was always a weapon. Everything for Chloe was an investment in her future. Dance lessons, expensive clothes, a brand new car the day she turned 16, tuition for a private college she had no intention of taking seriously. Everything for me was an expense, a burden. I had to work a part-time job from the age of 15 to pay for my own school supplies, my own clothes, my own anything. When I asked for help paying for a prep course for my college entrance exams, my father told me money was tight. That same week, they paid for Chloe to go on a ski trip with her friends. I used books from the library and studied until my eyes burned. I got a score that earned me a significant scholarship to the state university. When I told them, expecting, for once, a flicker of pride, my mother's first words were, "Well, that's a relief. We certainly couldn't have afforded to send you." There was no congratulations. No, "We're so proud of you." Just relief that the burden had found another shoulder to rest on. This was the landscape of my life for 18 years. A constant, grinding erosion of my sense of self. I learned to be quiet, to be small, to expect nothing. I lived in my books, in my mind, in the future where I could finally be free of them. And that future was about to arrive, heralded by the single most catastrophic act of betrayal they had ever committed. The inciting incident, as they say in the books I loved so much. The moment the story truly begins. It was the summer after I graduated high school. I was working 2 jobs to save up money for college dorm supplies and books. Chloe, who had just finished her first year of college by the skin of her teeth, was home for the summer. My parents decided we should take a family road trip before we both went off to school. A last hurrah. It felt more like a hostage situation to me. The trip was, predictably, all about Chloe. We went to the cities she wanted to see, ate at the restaurants she picked, and spent an entire afternoon in a ridiculously expensive boutique so she could buy a new set of designer luggage for her return to college. The suitcases were beautiful, a creamy white leather that probably cost more than my first semester's tuition, even with the scholarship. My mother fawned over them as if Chloe had given birth to them herself. On the way home, driving through a desolate stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, it started to rain. A sudden, violent thunderstorm that turned the sky black. My father was driving, squinting into the deluge. A truck ahead of us hydroplaned, jackknifed, and we swerved to avoid it. There was a sickening crunch of metal, the world spun into a kaleidoscope of shattered glass and screaming, and then darkness. I woke up slumped against the passenger door, a blinding pain in my arm and my head. I could taste blood. The car was crumpled in a ditch on the side of the road. Through the shattered windshield, I could see my father and mother standing on the shoulder, seemingly okay. Chloe was there too, sobbing hysterically. But she wasn't looking at the car. She wasn't looking at me. She was pointing at the trunk, which had sprung open in the crash. She was screaming, "My luggage. My new luggage. It's getting ruined in the rain." And my mother, instead of running to the car to check on me, her daughter who wasn't moving, was comforting Chloe. "Shoo, sweetie, it's okay, we'll get it." My father, with a panicked look on his face, glanced at me in the car, then at my mother and Chloe, and his choice was made. He was an enabler to the very end. The two of them, my mother and my father, ran to the trunk and started hauling the ridiculously expensive, creamy white leather suitcases out of the wreckage and up onto the road, away from the rain. I was still in the car. My arm was broken, I could see the unnatural angle of it, and I was bleeding from a cut on my forehead. I tried to call out, but my voice was a weak croak. They didn't hear me, or they didn't want to. They saved the luggage first. They chose inanimate objects, symbols of my sister's vanity, over my life. That was the moment the funhouse mirror shattered. I saw them for what they were. Not just flawed, not just neglectful, but monstrous. As I lay there, watching them fuss over leather bags while I might have been dying, something inside me broke. But in its place, something hard and cold and unbreakable began to form. Another car eventually stopped. A kind family who called an ambulance. I remember the paramedic looking at my parents and Chloe, standing there with their pile of pristine luggage, and then back at me, being loaded onto a stretcher, and the look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated contempt. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed it: a broken arm, a concussion, and severe lacerations. My parents' excuse was that they were in shock. They didn't know what they were doing. But I knew. I saw it in their eyes. They weren't shocked, they were inconvenienced. My injuries were an annoying epilogue to the drama of Chloe's ruined luggage. As I lay in that hospital bed, they sat in the corner of the room, whispering with Chloe, planning how to get her a replacement set. I didn't say a word. I just watched them. And I made a decision. I was done. 2 weeks later, my arm in a cast, I packed a single duffel bag with the few things that were truly mine. My books, the clothes I had bought with my own money, and the $500 I had saved from my summer jobs. My mother found me at the door. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, her voice laced with that familiar, accusatory tone. "I'm leaving," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion she so loved to feast on. "Don't be ridiculous, Lily. You're going to college in a month. Where would you even go?" Her face was a mask of disbelief, as if her personal punching bag had suddenly announced it was retiring. "I don't know," I said. "But I'll figure it out." My father came into the hallway, his face etched with weak-willed concern. "Now, Lily, let's not be hasty. Your mother is right. Let's talk about this." "Talk?" I almost laughed. "We've been talking for 18 years. You just never listened." I looked at him, at this man who chose luggage over his child, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty pity. Chloe appeared at the top of the stairs, a smirk on her face. "Let her go," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "She'll be back in a week, begging for money." That was the last thing I heard as I walked out the door and didn't look back. Her words were meant to be a curse, but they became my fuel. I would rather starve on the street than ever ask them for anything again. The first few months were a special kind of hell. Figuring it out was a euphemism for a desperate, clawing survival. The $500 disappeared with terrifying speed, eaten up by cheap motel rooms and bus station hot dogs. I ended up in the city where my university was, but weeks before my dorm would open. I was officially homeless. For a while, I slept in a 24-hour laundromat, huddled in a corner, pretending to be waiting for a cycle to finish, the smell of bleach and damp clothes becoming the scent of my new life. I ate peanut butter with a plastic spoon for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was a ghost haunting the edges of a life I was supposed to be starting. I got a job washing dishes in a greasy spoon diner, the kind of place where the grease was a permanent fixture on the walls and the air. The work was brutal, hot, and endless, but it was money. It was survival. My hands were perpetually raw, my back ached, but every dollar I earned was mine. It hadn't been filtered through their judgment or given with a sigh of resignation. It was pure. The owner of the diner, a gruff old man named Sal, mostly ignored me for the first month. Then one day, he saw me on my break, not smoking or staring into space like the other dishwashers, but hunched over a calculus textbook I'd bought at a used bookstore. "What's a kid like you doing in a place like this?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. I told him. Not the whole dramatic story, just the basics. Going to university, saving up, came here a little early. He just grunted and walked away. But the next day, he told me I could eat one meal for free every shift. And a week later, he offered me the spare room above the diner. It was tiny, barely more than a closet with a mattress on the floor and a window that overlooked a garbage-strewn alley, but it had a lock on the door. It was safe. It was mine. It was the first act of unconditional kindness I had received in my entire life, and I almost wept with gratitude. Sal was my turning point. He saw a flicker of potential in the grubby, exhausted girl washing his dishes, and he fanned it into a tiny flame. When the semester started, my life became a frantic, exhausting race against the clock. I worked at the diner from 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning, slept for 4 hours in my little room, and then went to class from 8 until 3. I studied in the library between classes, on the bus, during my 10-minute breaks at work. I was fueled by caffeine, spite, and a desperate, burning need to prove Chloe wrong. To prove them all wrong. The exhaustion was a physical weight, a constant pressure behind my eyes, but the alternative was unthinkable. Failure meant crawling back to them, and I would have died first. My professors noticed me. I was the girl in the front row, the one who always had the answers, the one who asked questions that showed I'd done more than just the required reading. My computer science professor, Dr. Albright, took a particular interest in me. She saw the raw intelligence that my family had always dismissed as being in the clouds. She saw the relentless work ethic born of desperation. She became my mentor, my champion. She pushed me, challenged me, gave me access to research projects normally reserved for graduate students. She saw the fire in me and gave it oxygen. Under her guidance, I flourished. I found that the logical, structured world of coding and algorithms made sense to me in a way the chaotic, emotional world of my family never had. It was a world of rules that applied equally to everyone. A world where effort produced results. I started building small applications, freelance coding projects that I did in the slivers of free time I had. First, it was just a little extra money, enough to stop eating peanut butter for every meal. Then it was more. By my junior year, I was making enough from my freelance work to quit the diner. I thanked Sal with tears in my eyes and a promise to repay his kindness. He just waved me off, telling me to go make something of myself. My senior year, a project I developed for Dr. Albright's advanced algorithms class caught the eye of a tech incubator. It was an innovative data compression algorithm, faster and more efficient than anything on the market. They offered me seed funding. They offered me a chance to build a company. I was 21 years old, and the world was cracking open for me. I worked for 2 years straight, pouring everything I had into the company. The memory of my mother's dismissiveness, my father's disappointment, Chloe's sneering face, it was all fuel for my engine. They wanted me to be small, so I decided to become immense. And I did. The company took off like a rocket. By the time I was 23, I was making a 6-figure salary. By 25, the company was acquired by a major tech firm in a deal that made me a millionaire. Just like that. After a lifetime of being told I was worthless, my worth was now a number with a lot of zeros after it. I stayed on with the larger company, moving to a major city and climbing the corporate ladder with a speed that shocked everyone but me. I knew what I was capable of. I had survived hell, a boardroom was nothing. I bought a beautiful apartment with a view of the city, I traveled the world, I reconnected with Sal and sent him a check that allowed him to retire and buy a small fishing boat, his lifelong dream. I met a man named Alex, an architect who was kind and steady and who loved my mind as much as he loved my smile. He listened to my story, not with pity, but with a quiet, simmering rage on my behalf. He saw the scars but treated them as proof of my strength, not my damage. For the first time, I was happy. Genuinely, securely happy. And for nearly 10 years, there was silence from my past. A beautiful, peaceful silence. I had built a new life, a fortress of success and love, and I thought the ghosts had been banished for good. But ghosts are patient. And mine were about to learn that I was rich. The catalyst was, of all things, a podcast. A popular tech show wanted to interview me about my journey, the Wunderkind, who came from nowhere and built a revolutionary algorithm. I was hesitant, but Alex and my PR team convinced me it would be inspiring. I told a sanitized version of my story. I didn't name names. I just said I came from a difficult background and had to make my own way. I talked about hard work, mentorship, and a little bit of luck. The episode went viral. It was shared across social media, written up in online magazines. And somewhere, in the suburban house I had fled, they saw it. They saw my face, my name, the headlines that called me a tech millionaire. And the silence was broken. The first contact was an email from my mother. The subject line was simply, "Your mother." My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. It was a masterpiece of manipulative sentimentality. "My dearest Lily," she wrote, "I saw an article about you, and my heart just burst with pride. I always knew you had it in you. We have missed you more than words can say all these years. The silence has been a terrible punishment for us. Chloe is a mother now, you have 2 beautiful nephews who would love to know their aunt. We are still your family, and we love you. Please, can we just talk?" Not a word of apology. Not a mention of the accident, the abandonment, the years of cruelty. Just a syrupy sweet revision of history where they were the victims of my absence. My hand was shaking as I deleted it. I didn't reply. A week later, the letters started arriving at my office. Thick, creamy envelopes with my mother's elegant handwriting. More of the same. Guilt-tripping, love-bombing, carefully constructed nostalgia about a happy childhood that never existed. Then Chloe found me on social media. She sent a friend request, which I ignored. Then came the direct messages. "Lily, I can't believe how amazing you've done. I'm so proud to call you my sister. Mom and Dad are getting older, you know. It would mean the world to them to see you. And my boys, Leo and Sam, they ask about you." It was all lies. They wouldn't have known my name. I blocked her. The rejection seemed to flip a switch. The sweet, manipulative facade cracked, and the monster I remembered began to emerge. The messages started coming from anonymous accounts. "You think you're so much better than us, don't you? You owe us. We raised you. You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for us." The logic was so twisted it was almost laughable. They believed they were entitled to my success because they had made my life so miserable that I was forced to become successful to escape them. It was the logic of a parasite. Then came the phone calls. My private number, somehow. It was my mother, her voice no longer sweet, but sharp, demanding. "Lily, this is ridiculous. You are being childish. We are your family. We need you." Need. That was the word that gave it all away. I stayed silent, listening. "Your sister is having a hard time," she went on. "Her husband left her. She's trying to raise 2 boys on her own. She needs help. Your father and I have done all we can, our retirement is gone trying to support her. You have so much. It's your duty to help your family." And there it was. The unmasked motive. Chloe, the golden child, had failed. She had followed the path they laid out for her: be beautiful, marry well, don't worry about a career, and it had all fallen apart. Now they were broke, and they looked at me and saw a solution. A walking, talking bank account. I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, cold. "No." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "What did you say?" She stammered, as if the word was a foreign language. "I said no," I repeated. "I will not be giving you or Chloe a single cent ever." And I hung up. That's when the real escalation began. It was no longer about manipulation, it was about destruction. They couldn't have my money, so they would try to destroy the life I had built with it. They started with my reputation. An anonymous email was sent to my company's board of directors, claiming I had stolen my initial algorithm, that I was a fraud who had cheated my way to the top. It claimed I was mentally unstable, a pathological liar who had cut off her loving family for no reason. It was a character assassination attempt, filled with twisted versions of my childhood stories, painting me as the villain. My boss called me into his office, a look of concern on his face. He showed me the email. My stomach turned to ice, but the hard, cold thing that had formed in me all those years ago took over. I looked my boss in the eye and said, "This is a malicious lie from estranged family members who are trying to extort money from me. I can prove it." That night, I told Alex everything. Every ugly detail I had glossed over before. The constant humiliation, the sabotage, the accident. I told him about the recent calls, the threats. He listened, his expression hardening into a cold fury. "This is harassment, Lily. Extortion. We're not going to let them do this." The next day, he had an appointment for me with one of the best lawyers in the city. Her name was Evelyn Reed, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who looked like she ate corporate bullies for breakfast. I told her the whole story, from the spelling bee to the luggage to the anonymous email. She listened patiently, taking notes. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair. "They've made a mistake," she said, a small, dangerous smile on her face. "They've picked a fight with someone who has the resources to fight back. And they've been stupid enough to put their threats in writing." Her advice was simple and ruthless. Do not engage. Do not reply. But document everything. Every call, every email, every anonymous post. Install security cameras at your home and office. And start digging. Find out everything you can about Chloe's situation. Knowledge is power. So that's what I did. I became a detective in my own life. I hired a private investigator. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie, but it was necessary. The PI's report came back a week later, and it was even grimmer than I had imagined. Chloe's life was a train wreck. She had married a wealthy man who had finally gotten tired of her spending and her laziness and left her. She had no job skills, no work history. The house was in foreclosure. She was deep in debt. But the worst part, the part that made my blood run cold, was about my nephews, Leo and Sam. The report detailed neglect. The boys were often left alone. They were registered at school but were frequently absent. Neighbors had reported hearing Chloe screaming at them. There were whispers of a call to Child Protective Services that had gone nowhere because Chloe had charmed the caseworker, just like she had charmed everyone her whole life. Reading that report, something shifted in me. This was no longer about protecting my money or my reputation. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. It was about those two little boys, trapped in the same toxic dynamic that I had escaped. They were the new scapegoats. I saw my own childhood reflected in their neglect, and the cold, hard thing inside me became a white-hot fire of protective rage. I would not let the cycle continue. I would not let them do to Leo and Sam what they had done to me. Evelyn was sober when I told her about the boys. "This changes things," she said. "This gives us leverage. But we have to be careful. We need irrefutable proof." The harassment was getting worse. They started stalking me. I would see a car that looked like my father's parked down the street from my apartment building. I got a call at 3 a.m. from Chloe, sobbing and drunk, first begging me for money, then screaming that I was a heartless monster who deserved to die alone. I recorded it all. The final straw came when they tried to weaponize the legal system against me. They filed a frivolous lawsuit. It was a bizarre, rambling document claiming that I had exploited my family's intellectual property by using my life story for the podcast and that I owed them millions in damages for emotional distress. It was insane, but a lawsuit is a public record. It was designed to damage my professional standing, to force my company's hand. This was the takedown attempt Evelyn had been waiting for. We didn't just file a motion to dismiss. We countersued. For harassment, for defamation, and for the intentional infliction of emotional distress. And we attached the evidence. Every email. Every transcript of every recorded call. The private investigator's report. Affidavits from former neighbors who had witnessed their behavior towards me as a child. A sworn statement from Sal, the diner owner, about the state I was in when he found me. And most damningly, a detailed report on the ongoing neglect of Leo and Sam, which we simultaneously filed with Child Protective Services, requesting an immediate welfare check. We weren't just defending, we were attacking. We were taking every lie they had ever told and holding it up to the light. The result was catastrophic for them. The lawsuit was dismissed almost immediately, with the judge scolding their lawyer for filing such a baseless and malicious claim. My company's board, upon seeing our countersuit and the mountain of evidence, issued a public statement of support for me, condemning the harassment campaign. My family's attempt to ruin my reputation had backfired spectacularly, cementing my position and making them look like deranged extortionists. But the real explosion came from the CPS filing. This time, armed with my PI's detailed report, CPS didn't send a single caseworker to be charmed. They sent a team, and they went with the police. The confrontation happened not in a boardroom, but in a sterile, impersonal family court hearing room a few weeks later. It was a preliminary hearing for temporary custody of the boys. I was there with Alex and Evelyn. My mother, father, and Chloe were on the other side. They looked haggard, defeated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen, simmering rage. The social worker gave her report. The house was filthy. There was barely any food. The boys were underweight, and Leo, the older one, had bruises on his arm that he tried to explain away with a story Chloe had clearly coached him on. When the social worker recommended that the boys be placed in my temporary custody, pending a full investigation, Chloe snapped. It was like watching a dam break. All the years of entitlement, of getting her way, of facing no consequences, came crashing down. She stood up, her face purple with rage, and pointed a trembling finger at me. You! She shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet room. You did this. You witch. You were always jealous of me. You ruined my life. She started to move towards me, her eyes wild. My mother was pulling at her arm, whispering, Chloe, no, stop it. My father just sat there, as useless as ever, his face pale. Alex stood up and moved slightly in front of me. Evelyn put a calm hand on my arm. The bailiffs were already moving in. But Chloe wasn't done. She lunged, not at me, but at the social worker, trying to snatch the report out of her hands, screaming, lies, they're all lies. The bailiffs grabbed her. She fought them, kicking and screaming like a cornered animal. It was the ultimate, public meltdown of the golden child who had never been told no. And in that moment, as I watched her being restrained, her perfect face twisted into a mask of ugly fury, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound and weary sadness. All this destruction, all this pain, because they couldn't stand to see me happy. Because my success was a mirror that showed them their own failures. As they were leading a hysterical Chloe out of the courtroom, my mother turned and looked at me. Her face was a ruin of collapsed pride and hatred. You took everything, she hissed, her voice full of venom. You took my daughter. I just looked back at her, the cold, hard thing inside me finally speaking its truth. I didn't take her, I said, my voice steady. You broke her. You spent your whole life telling her she was perfect and the world owed her everything. But the world disagreed. And so do I. She flinched as if I had slapped her. Then she turned and followed her ruined daughter out of the room. The downfall was swift and total after that. Chloe was charged with assaulting a court officer, in addition to the mounting child endangerment charges. Faced with prison time, my father, the eternal enabler, finally broke his lifelong allegiance. In a bid for leniency for himself in my civil suit, he gave a full deposition against both my mother and Chloe. He corroborated everything, detailing my mother's lifelong campaign of emotional abuse and Chloe's escalating instability. He threw them both under the bus to save himself. It was the final, pathetic act in a lifetime of cowardice, and it severed their toxic family unit for good. My mother, implicated in the harassment and the attempts to cover up the neglect, was also charged. I was there, in the back of the courtroom, when Chloe was sentenced. She got 2 years for the assault and the neglect charges, with a long period of probation to follow. Her parental rights were terminated. My mother received a suspended sentence and a permanent restraining order, legally barring her from ever contacting me or the boys again. I watched Chloe, the golden child, the girl who had everything handed to her, being led away in handcuffs. The smirk she'd worn when I left home all those years ago was gone, replaced by a look of blank, hollow disbelief. She looked over at me one last time, her eyes searching for, what? Pity? Fear? I gave her nothing. I just watched, a silent observer at the end of a very long, very painful story. And as the doors closed behind her, I felt the weight of my entire childhood lift from my shoulders. It was the quiet satisfaction of a debt finally being paid in full. Justice. That evening, Alex and I went to the foster home to pick up Leo and Sam. They were 6 and 8 years old, two small, quiet boys with big, scared eyes. They knew who I was, their aunt who had suddenly appeared like a figure from a myth. They were hesitant, clutching their small bags of belongings. I knelt down in front of them, just as I had seen kind adults do in movies, a gesture I had never once received myself. "Hi, I'm Lily," I said softly. "I know this is all very strange and scary. But I promise you, you're safe now. I'm going to take care of you." Leo, the older one, looked at me, his expression wary. He had been trained to be the parent, the protector. "Are you rich?" he asked, the question so blunt and childlike it almost made me laugh. "Yes, I am," I said honestly. He considered this for a moment. "Does that mean we'll have food?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. My heart didn't just break, it atomized. The sound of it shattering echoed in the space where my own childhood hunger used to live. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It means you will always have food. And you will never, ever be left alone again." And so, my new life began. A life with Alex, and now with two little boys who needed to learn what love and safety felt like. We bought a bigger house in the suburbs, with a huge backyard for them to play in. We filled the pantry with food. We got them into therapy, got them caught up in school. We read them bedtime stories every night and tucked them in, something no one had ever done for me. It was hard. They had so many scars, so much fear. But slowly, inch by inch, they began to heal. The nightmares became less frequent. The quiet watchfulness in their eyes was gradually replaced by the carefree laughter of children. They were learning to be kids, and I was learning what it meant to be a family. A real one. A chosen one. I thought about my old family sometimes. My father sent one final, pathetic letter of apology, which I threw away unopened. My mother and Chloe were ghosts, legally barred from my world. They were a cautionary tale, a lesson in how bitterness and jealousy can curdle a soul. They had tried to destroy me because my light made them feel their own darkness. But they failed. Their poison had forced me to develop an antidote, and that antidote was a life they could never touch, a life built on resilience, hard work, and a fierce, protective love for the family I had made for myself. One evening, I was sitting on the back porch with Alex, watching the boys chase fireflies in the twilight. They were squealing with joy, their small jars blinking with captured light. I remembered that last conversation I'd had with my mother, her accusation that I had taken everything. And I realized she was wrong. I hadn't taken anything. I had just stopped letting them take from me. I had built instead of destroyed. I had rescued instead of abandoned. I remembered standing at their front door all those years ago, a terrified girl with a broken arm and a broken heart, telling them I would figure it out. And as I watched my nephews, my partner, my beautiful, peaceful life, I smiled. I had. I really, truly had.